Hello, and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. My name is Cecilia, and on behalf of OTC Markets, we're very pleased you've joined us for our next live presentation from Black Swan Graphene. Before I introduce our speaker, a few points to note. Please submit your questions in the question box to the left of the slides. If you're interested in scheduling a meeting with Black Swan Graphene, please click on the Meetings tab found on the left navigation bar. You will be able to view the company's availability and submit a meeting request. On a final note, all today's presentations will be recorded and available for 24/7 replay. At this point, I'm very pleased to welcome Simon Marcotte, President and CEO of Black Swan Graphene, which trades on the OTCQB venture market under the symbol BSWGF and on the TSXV under the symbol SWAN. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and thank you everyone for attending today's session and presentation of Black Swan Graphene. Black Swan is actually has been long in the making for the most part of the last 10 years or so, but it has been a public company for just a few months now, and we're just starting to proceed to some visibility effort and exposure to the company, because although we have progressed significantly on several fronts in the last few months, if no one knows about it, it doesn't reflect reality. So you can expect the company to be a lot more visible in medias and public markets from this point on. So thank you. I see that many of you, pretty impressive number of people, have decided to join the webcast today. So thank you very much. And obviously, don't be shy to call us directly if you have any further question after this presentation. Cautionary statement. Obviously, I'll be making some forward-looking statements. I invite you to review at your convenience. Very quick highlights of the company. I won't go through the left bullet points, but to the right, we have currently about $10 million in cash in the company, so we are well funded to do what we say we're going to do. So that's a significant de-risking of the company for a company our size to have this amount of capital. We have a very, very strong shareholder base as well, which I will go through shortly. And we also have research coverage already from Paradigm Securities, the analyst being Mr. Marvin Wolf. We also have a pilot plant capable of producing about 40 tons of graphene. This pilot plant is located in northern England, near the city of Newcastle. And what we are envisioning here is much larger scale production. So we're planning a much larger production facility to match the growth in the graphene sector. And what we are envisioning is a 10,000 ton capacity, because we're going after volume driven industries. And currently we are designing the next step of our next scale up into production via a scoping study, which we hope to release the results of imminently. And that should give a better understanding of the economics. Now, if I slip to the next point, before I get into broader details of the company, I want to bring your attention to a news that we published back in May. Black Swan Graphene now has a partnership with Nouveau Graphite, which is North America's leading graphite company. Nouveau Graphite has built the biggest graphite team outside of China, I would say. And North America need a thriving graphite industry to supply all the battery materials. It is a strategic mineral and currently the world is relying on China, and that has to change. Therefore, I would take the bet that the Quebec graphite industry will strive and be globally relevant. There's two well-known graphite projects in Quebec, both of them operated by Nouveau Monde Graphite, one in near Matawini and one northern Quebec. And Nouveau Monde Graphite, I will point out, is listed on the New York Stock Exchange under ticker NMG. So Nouveau Monde Graphite already has a plant up and running near Montreal, producing graphite concentrate. And to the announcement that I was referring to, Black Swan has announced a preliminary agreement with Nouveau Monde Graphite in order to establish itself in this very same plant, therefore creating the first fully integrated facility from graphite ore in the ground to graphite concentrate and to graphene finished product. Obviously, this will help have a better control over the graphite being produced. It will also allow the company to leverage the facility, the QA/QC protocol, the laboratory equipment, potentially teaming up for distribution and that sort of thing. So that's an important partnership for Black Swan Graphene. If I go take things from the ground up, quick note on valuation. You see here a few graphene-oriented companies. Not all of them are directly graphene producers as we are, but for the sake of having some valuation comparables, you have a few names here of companies that are either producing graphene or looking to benefit from the emerging graphene applications. On the bottom side, you can see our shareholders. So we have Thomas Swan, where the technology was developed, which owns 16%. So this technology that we have was developed really over the last 10 years or so within Thomas Swan in England. So Thomas Swan is a 100-year-old company, a mid-tier chemical company, very well established, very strong reputation. And Black Swan was created out of Thomas Swan in order to accelerate the commercialization of this graphene technology. Mason Graphite also owns 43% of the company. So Mason Graphite also owns 49% of one of the two graphite projects in Quebec that I was referring to. Always here with the idea of creating an integrated supply chain. We have a few key private investors, and I will point out that the last financing that we did was done at around 15 cents Canadian, and currently the shares are trading at about half that, around 8.5 cents Canadian. When we did this financing, there was an enormous amount of demand, and then when we started transacting, we were a bit light on the visibility efforts, which may explain the pullback, obviously, along with the severe pullback in the market over the year. But Black Swan currently has a market cap of about 23 million, with about $10 million in cash. So the enterprise value is very low right now, which creates an opportunity. The chairman of the company is Mr. Harry Swan. Mr. Swan is the CEO and owner of Thomas Swan. So obviously a very large shareholder of Black Swan, and he's also the chairman of the company. Other people that are behind the company, obviously myself, then Michael Edwards. Michael Edwards was the head of the Advanced Material Division at Thomas Swan, where this technology was developed. And he joined Black Swan full-time as the COO of the company, which I think speaks volume to his enthusiasm. Mr. Paul Hardy, seasoned veteran of the financial sector in Canada, as VP Corporate Development. And then we also have Henry Willem, who's a specialist in carbon processing, formerly with Imerys, We have Peter Demoni, who represents Mason Graphite on the board. We also have David Deek as an independent director. Mr. Deek works for in the private equity business. Before that, he was involved in lithium. He's well known for having been involved with Lithium Americas, Canada's leading lithium company. And also, prior to that, he was in charge of sourcing battery materials for Tesla at Gigafactory 1 in California. We also have Mr. Aidan Sullivan, who has an extensive network of relationship. Greg Duras is CFO. Roy McDowell also as a director, who also represents Mason Graphite. So very quickly here, what is graphene? So graphene comes from graphite. So when we're thinking graphite, what is graphite? It is, when we talk about a lead pencil, it's actually graphite that is in it. So when you exfoliate graphite to the extreme, you come down to just a few layers. So just one flake of graphite will be, typically 300,000 layers of graphene stacked together. And when you exfoliate it to the maximum to one single layer, that is textbook what graphene is. And that's for a very niche, very small application. What we do at Black Swan is produce a graphene powder. So it is not exfoliated to the extreme, but it's exfoliated down to very few layers together, and then that becomes a graphene powder, which in turn becomes an additive, and it does enhance the product in which you inject the graphene. So the main market that we're going after are twofold and are very volume driven. The idea here is to produce high quality graphene powder at a low price in order to go after a very large market. The first market is concrete. So concrete is a target market for us because concrete is responsible for about 8% of the global CO2 emissions. And by injecting graphene into concrete, we can reduce the amount of concrete that's required in order to achieve the same strength. And it is a big problem for the CO2 emissions. If concrete would be a country, it would rank after China and the United States as far as an emitter. So any solution where we can lower the CO2 emissions from the sector is being very, very well received. The performance that you see on the right here are from Nationwide Engineering in England, which has a wholly owned subsidiary called Concretine. They are seen as the leading company in using graphene into concrete. They were featured actually recently in the magazine The Economist in the May publication, if I recall. And those are figures from them. And they have been using the Black Swan graphene quite a bit. Even if you go on our website, you will see a small video of a big residential construction being built, and the concrete that you see being poured was using the graphene from Black Swan. So that is the first big market that we are going after. The second big market is plastics, any types of polymers. This is a game changer for the polymer industry. You make the plastic stronger, so big application obviously as reducing the weight of cars, trucks, so the lightweighting of the transportation industry, because you can achieve the same strength as metal parts by using graphene enhanced plastic parts. So you can either make a better product, stronger product, or you can lower cost, because if you achieve the same strength by using less polymer, therefore you will reduce cost, generally speaking. But it helps on many fronts with the polymer, even for gas permeability, which is important for any type of packaging, especially food packaging. This is the second big market that we are going after. There's also another big market that is very promising for graphene, and that is rubber, so the tire industry. And to enhance tires and rubbers with graphene is proven. We know it works. You have some specialty bike tires that do use graphene enhanced rubber. I believe, though, that it will take a bit more time for this industry to adopt graphene. And simply put, it's simply because it's an industry that is not fragmented. It's an industry where you have you have actually five big manufacturers. So for them to inject graphene into just one line of product, I think would require an amount of graphene that is simply not available today. So the graphene industry is taking off, and I believe it will, starting with the sectors that we're after, which is concrete and polymer. And as more and more capacity comes online, then the tire industry is likely to catch on and use graphene as well, which would be a huge market. I mean, but there's plenty of applications. It's been called a wonder material. There's plenty of applications for graphene, as you can see here, but we want to stay focused. We want to start focusing only on two silos, two industries. And once we have established some good traction on large volume, then we can look to expand into other applications. Here, without going into any details, it's simply a look at the type of market and the size of those markets, looking at concrete and looking at a breakdown of the different polymers that are expected to use more and more graphene. And then we're looking at, what type of loading ratio, right? The percentage of graphene within the polymer matrix at the end, and to look at the type of market that we're going after. So without doing the math, those are very, very large market. So even a little bit of graphene into those applications will result into massive demand for graphene. Just concrete alone, if you allow me to be cheesy, concrete is concrete is the second most used substance on Earth after water. So you can't find a market bigger than that. So that's what we're going after. And to the point made by Goldman Sachs, a while back published a research report about graphene. And what they explain in it is simply that it's about cost. And they make they use the example of carbon fiber in the 90s. Everybody knew about carbon fiber in the 90s, but it was too expensive. And when the price of carbon fiber went down, then the use of carbon fiber went up exponentially. And this is the same type of dynamic that we're looking at for graphene as well. From that same report, Goldman Sachs was mentioning that this tipping point where the market would start using graphene at scale would be about $25 US per kilogram. This is the point where, to that report, graphene would start being used for large-scale applications as an additive. So on the right side, we have what our expectations are, and I should make a cautionary statement here that those figures are not backed by a feasibility study. As I mentioned, we are currently advancing a scoping study defining those numbers. But those figures are based on extensive work that was done by Thomas Swan, in partnership with Thomas Swan, I should say. So we feel decently comfortable about those figures. But the point I want to make is that our expected cost of production, which includes the cost of the graphite itself, will be much lower than the about a third of that tipping point, right? Where we're looking to sell at about a third of that tipping point. So there's quite a bit of margins here for us to advance. And the other point is that we are looking to expand, as I mentioned, in Quebec, in the province of Quebec, where you have the cheapest, or one of the cheapest electricity costs in the world, and it is green electricity as well. So the plan is to leverage the province emerging graphite industry and to leverage the province low-cost electricity. Without going into too many details of the technology itself, I think it's important to mention that this technology has been upscaled 3 times. It has been upscaled from lab scale through pilot scale and finally to commercial scale, where we are at right now. And that's an important point, because when you come up with a process like this, when you upscale the technology, you really never know what's going to come out at the end of it, and it can impact your cost quite a bit. So all these factors have been de-risked already. So we are ready now to expand quite a bit more on the volume side. It is important to mention that we are working closely with the Graphene Engineering Innovation Center, as we call it, the GEEC, in Manchester, in England. The GEEC is the epicenter of the graphene globally. So, most companies in graphene are involved at the GEEC, and when companies get interested into how to secure graphene, how to apply graphene, and look into the possibilities of graphene, most of them go to the GEEC. This allows us to be introduced to a lot of potential partners and potential customers as well. But it is important also to mention that the performance that we mentioned here on this slide about improvement in polymers, improvement in compressive strength in concrete, and also tensile strength in concrete. Those are fairly impressive figure, but they have been independently calculated by the GEEC, which I think is important. As I mentioned, on the left here is a quick image of what I mentioned earlier, right? Nationwide engineering was mentioned into an article of The Economist. I wasn't sure about the month. It's May, the edition of May 21st to 27th. And they used our graphene into the concrete pour for that residential mini village that they built. That was 150 kilometers west of London. Our graphene is also used into other applications, but limiting the things to what was said publicly. You have a lot of test products and even some infrastructure-related product that have been testing our material. We're also working closely with some admixture company, which are the potential link between the graphene and the concrete itself, in order to get our graphene into the concrete. So there's different ways to approach the industry. We're looking also to formalize a lobbying effort to go from the top down will matter. So if we can convince governments that this is something that they need to support, I think this can get the ball rolling a lot faster for that industry. But again, if you go on the website, on the video, you will see a small video that's filming. We also have a partnership with Gerdau Graphene, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of the very well-known Gerdau Brazilian company. So we signed an agreement, a distribution agreement with Gerdau, who is a value-add distributor, if you may. So they also see how they can use the graphene in the most efficient way possible to get it into different type of applications. So that's obviously an important partnership for us. There's also a potential for graphene to be used into battery materials, and there's no doubt that there's an enormous potential there. Our graphene was proven to be, at the very least, relevant for this market. Our graphene was used in an R&D effort by Johnson Matthey. What you see there on the screen is actually a text from a press release issued by Johnson Matthey themselves, where they mention our graphene. Since then, Johnson Matthey has rejiggled their effort into battery materials. I know battery materials is a very in vogue topic, but to use graphene into batteries, it's a big undertaking, and it's a market that can take quite a bit of time to get qualified into. So currently, our main focus is really on concrete and polymer. Having said this, Mr. Henry Willem that we have in the company, as I mentioned earlier, his specialty has always been carbon-related battery materials. So there is definitely an avenue of growth for us there as well. Here, as I mentioned, we are decently funded, I would say, with about 10 million. Here you have the budget of the first 24 months, so we're about halfway through year one right now. So you can see that we have plenty of capital to achieve what we want to achieve over the next 2 years and then some. I'm not going to go through too many details here. So this, concludes the formal presentation. Again, we are the technology originated from Thomas Swan, a company who's 100-year-old. Mr. Swan himself, who's the great-grandchild of the founder of Thomas Swan, is Harry Swan, who's the chairman of Black Swan. So it's not a technology that's new, but it's a technology that's finally ready to get commercialized and benefit from the growth of the graphene sector. Hence, the timing of the company to be public. I see we have a very limited amount of time left. And from the questions that I see here, I think those are questions that are finally that I did address earlier in the. One question is about the percentage that we pour into concrete, or the percentage of pour that include concrete, include graphene. Right now, it's very little. It's a new opportunity. It's a new sector. There's just a little bit of graphene per unit of concrete. But right now, I wouldn't say there's any percentage of the concrete in the world that is using graphene. It is new, but as we get started, just a little bit, if we would have 5 or 10% of the concrete industry using graphene, it would have a massive impact on the graphene industry, and definitely for Black Swan. So stay tuned. We're working on some partnerships on this that will accelerate not only the growth of Black Swan, but accelerate, we believe, the adoption of graphene into concrete as well. On this note, I will thank you for spending a bit of time with us today. Again, we are our shares trade in Canada at the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol SWAN, as simple as that, and on the OTCQB market under the ticker BSWGF. If you have any further questions, our contact numbers are on the website, and as you can see on the last slide of the corporate presentation. Again, thank you very much for attending.